Hello, hello. Howdy, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Some Antics. Today I am joined by y'all, the lovely chat. How are you doing today? There's a bit of a delay, so I'm not going to wait super long for responses, but hello. Today I'm going to be introducing Eleventy. Eleventy is my favorite static site generator. That Michael says in all caps, good, how are you? I'm doing really well. I'm looking forward to this. It is a little weird just speaking into a microphone with no conversant on the other end. But I'm happy to have y'all here in the chat. Super excited about that. Yeah, so today, I'm going to be doing Eleventy. Eleventy is a static site generator. There are numerous static site generators out there. I'm not here to dunk on any of them. They all have their own various use cases and their needs and their benefits, and they're all pretty good at what they do. Um, I particularly love Eleventy because, as far as static site generators go, Eleventy feels, I don't know, pure isn't the word I'm looking for, but I kind of think about like a primary use case for a static site generator is that you have content and or data and you want to transform it into HTML. You don't want to do anything fancy. You don't want to make a web app out of it. You just have this content and data and you want to transform it into some HTML. And that's really what Eleventy's bread and butter is. That's what Eleventy excels at. Howdy, Chan. How's it going? All right. So I am currently on the Eleventy homepage. This is 11ty.dev. I'll put that in the chat. There we go. So, yeah, here's the homepage for Eleventy. When you get to the homepage, you can find the docs several ways. One is that this banner right here with the lovely balloon lifted possum, this banner is itself a link. Now, the way I prefer to get to the docs is by scrolling down a bit and clicking the super subtle documentation link, and that'll take me right there. It's really hard to miss, but if you look closely, you will be able to find it. So this will give you the docs for Eleventy, and there's tons of great information here. We're going to refer back to this over the several times over the course of the stream. So this is a great site to get to know. Additionally, I do want to shout out that the docs actually were not how I learned Eleventy. I learned Eleventy by taking a course from Andy Bell, his Learn Eleventy from Scratch course. It's really good, and I'm going to give it a heavy recommendation. He has currently gotten the price down to a nice cost of $69. It's absolutely worth it if Eleventy is something you're interested in. I'm not going to cover nearly everything that's covered in that course, but if you're looking to get up and running with building real sites in Eleventy, you can do a lot worse than this course. This course is great. Massive kudos to Andy for putting this out there. This course right here was the course that changed my mind on my blog. It's what really it was the catalyst for me switching everything over and porting my blog over to an Eleventy site. So that is the absolute best recommendation I can give for something like this. Yeah, so with that, let's get in and do some Eleventy. I'm going to start as far back from the beginning as I can, and because we've only got an hour, we're not going to be able to cover everything. As a result, I'm really hoping that we could turn today into what I'm calling a chat your own adventure, where if you guys get in the chat, if y'all get in the chat and just kind of let me know what you're curious about, what questions you have, what direction you would like to take the course, what aspects of Eleventy I should cover, let me know, because that'll be really great feedback, and we'll get to explore various exciting facets of Eleventy doing that. And I want to show you kind of my inspiration for the site that we'll be building. I have been announcing every stream a week at a time, and the thought on that is that If I'm announcing multiple different streams, multiple different guests, it can be hard to keep track of what's happening when. I I've really kept it like it's very much so been a queue, right, where I'm only actively promoting one stream at a time. But that's not great. I would love to be able to say, like, if I've got a really exciting guest on, I would really love to be able to let you know as early as those details are confirmed. So I'd like to have a site that can serve as a hub for showing you what streams are upcoming, which guests we're going to be having in the future when that's been decided. Additionally, when I upload the recordings, the VODs, to YouTube and provide captions and transcripts, I want a hub for that too. I don't want these streams to disappear into the ether. I want to have a hub of resource that people can come back to catch up on old streams that they might be interested in. And really, truly, the inspiration for this is from the Learn with Jason site, which I'm going to pull up at Lwj.dev. If you go to this, like, it highlights what the upcoming stream is, but it also gives you ways to catch up on old streams. And you can go over to the episodes tab here. You can see all of the old streams chronologically. And you can go to the schedule tab and you can see all of the scheduled upcoming streams. Right now I don't really want to have all these things be separate pages. I'm right now looking to have a single homepage that combines the backlog with the upcoming event schedule. So that's what I'll be building. It's a real site that I genuinely want to have up in production by the end of this hour. I'm going to be hosting it on Netlify, using GitHub for deployment. So that is my goal. So hopefully it kind of makes sense what the objective is here. But I'm going to start at the absolute beginning. And like I said, this stream has not been super heavily planned because even though I have a goal in mind for the site I want to build, it's more important to me that this gets to be a chat your own adventure where you can ask questions about Eleventy and kind of choose the direction for what we cover next. That way I'm covering stuff that's interesting to y'all. Cool. Let's go ahead and get started. I have right here a brand new, absolutely clean repository. There is nothing in this. It's just a brand new repository. So here is where we're going to get started. First of all, Eleventy transforms Markdown into HTML pages. I'm sure you could have it transform other files besides Markdown, but it's really the Markdown transformation is what really seems super built into Eleventy. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Markdown file. I'm going to call this, we're doing a bit of a hello world, right? So I'm going to call this helloworld.md. And inside here, I'm just going to put in some absolutely standard Markdown. And we'll link this to us. Add in a bit more syntax. There we go. Just a absolutely standard Markdown file. Nothing profound with this. I would like to use Eleventy to transform this Markdown file into an HTML page. And so the way I'm going to do that, in my terminal, I'm going to come down to my terminal here, and let me know, by the way, if the font size is fine for y'all. Hey, Prince! It's good to see you. How have things been going on your end? Delays are always really weird. I'm still getting used to the fact that stream and chat are not exactly real time. But yeah, so I've got this Markdown file. I want to transform it into an HTML page using Eleventy. So first of all, we are going to eventually install Eleventy, but before we get to that point, I want to just show you at its core what Eleventy is doing for us. So I'm going to use npx to execute Eleventy. So I'm going to do npx at 11ty/Eleventy. And yes, there are two different spellings for Eleventy. They're both canon, if you will. But yeah, this it's wild. I I love the sheer chaos of having two different spellings for the same name. Prince says everything is going well. I'm checking my Raspberry Pi because I might have broken it by accident. No, I'm sorry to hear that, Prince. You're doing some really cool stuff with that, and I'm excited to see more. All right, I'm gonna execute the Eleventy library. It's going to think for a bit. It's always gonna be a little slower right now because we're using npx rather than a local install. But it's gonna go fetch Eleventy, and it's going to process this markdown file, and it's going to generate an underscore site directory for us. And you can see that it's done that. We have an underscore site. And inside there, if I pop that underscore site with our built site, if we pop open our build, you can see that we have a hello world directory, and that hello world directory has an index.html. If I pop open that index.html, you can see that we have an HTML translation, if you will, of our markdown. A thing I do want to call out here is that this is not really a full-bodied HTML page, right? This is a fragment at best. This just has the pure, like, just honestly just the translation of our markdown into HTML. None of the surroundings, none of the trappings, I guess you might expect. Yeah, so that's something that we're going to want to fix. Additionally, do notice that the directory structure of our build, this underscore site, is following the conventions set out by our file names. So because I created helloworld.md, that got turned into hello world slash index.html. And so if we had called hello world something else, then we would have a different path here. I think that's fairly straightforward. And because it's hello world slash index.html, that index.html, that's a conventional name for the basically browsers recognize it and recognizes like you can leave off the index.html and just cut it off at the trailing slash. So if we were hosting our site up anywhere, it will eventually be hosted at SomeAntics.dev. If we were to host our site, we could go to SomeAntics.dev /hello world, and that's how we would be able to get to this page. Yeah, so Chan's asking, is there anything you have to keep a local install of Eleventy for, or is it just the convenience of local config and speed? Consequently, does running the npx version honor the local config? I believe, yes, running the npx version should honor the local config, which we'll get to the config later. In my experience, the main reason you would want to locally install Eleventy is that would allow you to pin the version. So if Eleventy updates down the road, then that's fine. You're not going to risk breaking changes in your application because everyone who's cloned the repository has the current version mentioned or current acceptable versions mentioned in their package.json. Which we don't have a package.json yet because we haven't initialized this as an npm project yet. But yeah, that is, I think, the main sell is local installs let you pin the version down and therefore make the decision when you want to update Eleventy rather than consuming just whatever version's latest. Hopefully that helps, Chen. All right. So yeah, we have this hello world. And the next thing I want to demonstrate for y'all is that we can create our own directory structure here. So I'm not going to use this as a blog, but let's say I did want to use this as a blog. I could create a folder called blog. That would be fairly descriptive. And inside here, I'm going to say my post.md. Inside here, I'm going to go my post. It's a post. And I'll re-execute Eleventy. And as I do this, I want you to kind of ponder, like, what do you expect the final result to look like? What will the final build look like? What would we see in that underscore site directory? We're done building, so we can confirm our assumptions. We have, inside our underscore site build, we have a blog directory. And inside blog, we have a my post directory, and inside my post, we have index.html. So the build is following the directory structure that we set forth in our Eleventy project. This is one of the things I really love about Eleventy, is that Eleventy's every framework is opinionated. Every static site generator is going to be opinionated. But Eleventy's opinions seem to be that its opinions shouldn't get in your way. As opposed to something like Next, where the pages directory is just like that's a magic directory, and you just kind of have to deal with that convention. You have to put everything in this pages directory for it to get actually output to a page. Eleventy lets you set up your directory however you want, and as we might get into later, it lets you configure those settings as much as you want to. It's highly configurable, and I think that's super, super cool. So yeah, we have the trappings of an Eleventy site. I'm gonna do a few more things for quality of life improvers, quality of life improvements, just to get this actually up and running as a fully fledged application with the opinions that I share. So the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna nuke our _site directory, because our hello world and other markdown files, we're not gonna hold on to those for very long. I'm gonna create me a git ignore. I don't really want to include the built site, so I'm gonna exclude that. I'm gonna exclude node modules. I'm gonna exclude our lock files. I typically use yarn, but I think for today I'm gonna use npm just because that's more universal. I think that's everything I need to. You know what? I'm just gonna preempt everything and just immediately ignore the DS store. Cool. We've got a git ignore. Gonna nuke everything else in here. No more markdown files. Hey, Maxim! It's good to see you. How have you been since Advent of Code? I haven't heard a whole lot from you. I'm going to go ahead and initialize this as an npm project. Just give it all the defaults. There you go. Yeah, so here's what we've got. We've got Adrian. Hello, Adrian. It's good to see you as well. Hopefully work's treating you all right. Yeah, so I've now created this as a node module. And at this point, I want to go ahead and install Eleventy proper. So I'm going to npm install at 11ty/Eleventy spelled out. It's going to think for a moment. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and create some scripts. So I want to be able to run npm run build and execute Eleventy to transform my site, create a built version of my site, right? And what we just saw was if you just execute the Eleventy package directly, you get that build. So if I want to build an Eleventy site using npm run build, I can create a script called build, and that script will just be sent to Eleventy. I'm also going to add in another script, which is going to be dev. We're going to be able to run npm run dev, and this is going to be set to Eleventy -- serve. So many repositories have their own, I'm getting overwrite. There we go. Oh wait, no, whoops. Let me just reinstall Eleventy. There we go. Yeah, many web frameworks will have a dev server that lets you just like hot reload your experience, your site as you're building it. Eleventy's hot reload is powered by browser sync. So by adding this npm run dev command, we're telling it, hey, build the site every time we change a file, rebuild the site, and then also serve that built site using browser sync. So it's pretty cool. Maxim says, I've been on a break and recharging my batteries during January, slowly getting back to creating content now. I hear that. Yeah. Well, it's great to see you. It's great to have you here. Cool. So we have now installed Eleventy. If we can confirm that our scripts are working as expected, it might make sense if I had a markdown file again. And that markdown file, I guess I'm just going to call it stream schedule with Eleventy.md. Just put in some filler stuff here. Build a It would help if I could use punctuation. Happening right now. Okay, so to test our scripts, we could do npm run build. Just gonna think for a minute. Look how much faster that is now that we're not pulling from npm with npx. We now have our stream schedule with Eleventy. That's working. We could also do npm run dev. And now this is going to serve up our site on port 8080. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And it's going to tell us that we can't get the root. That's fine because we haven't created a home page. But what we have created is stream schedule with Eleventy. And look, it's right there. We've got a page. Congratulations, we're all done. We've made an Eleventy site. We're going to go raid. No, we still have a lot more we want to do. Another thing that I want to do as a quality of life improver is as the site grows, we're going to have a whole bunch of markdown files just like here in the root level of my repository. And that just feels gross to me. Like the root level of a repo should be for the high level configurations and not for the content. So I want to be able to, I guess, kind of hide away my schedule. My markdown files. I want to be able to hide them away. I also would love, because I'm going to be hosting this up on GitHub in a way that anyone can contribute to, I would love to be able to like have markdown files at the top level of the repo to serve as like a README or a contributor's guide. Markdown files that I don't want to transform into HTML pages for my site. So it's time to start setting up some configuration for Eleventy. The way you do configurations in Eleventy is you create a .eleventy.js file in the root of your directory, in the root of your repository. And in here, you can export just directly an object, or in my case, I'm going to export a function because down the road, there are going to be more things that I want to do in here. And this function is going to return a configuration object. Object, not parentheses. And truth be told, I always forget the syntax for this. So I'm going to go pull up the Eleventy docs. And I specifically want to set the input directory is what I'm trying to do. So I'm on the configuration page. I'll do y'all a favor and send that to you. Yeah, so in here, my mission, if I choose to accept it, is to return a configuration object. This configuration object can accept a dir property, and that'll contain some directory configurations. So I'm going to say that I've got this dir. I'm going to change the input directory. I'm going to change where Eleventy by default is going to look for all the things, not just markdown files, but layouts, as we'll see, and others. And I'm going to say source. I think that's a fairly reasonable standard. I'm going to kill the dev server. I'm never entirely sure when I'm supposed to kill Eleventy's dev server. It just feels like anytime I make a change to .eleventy.js, it's a bit of a gamble. But I'm going to do that. I'm killing the dev server. I'm going to create a source directory. Inside source, I'm going to create an event. And I'm actually going to start populating this with like real information, like things that are actually coming up. Such as, for instance, next week we have Michael Chan, whom you might know as Chantastic, or he's in the chat as LunchDev. We're going to have him on. He's going to be talking about building accessible SVGs in SVG icons in React using accessible SVG icons in React. So I'll put in accessible SVGs with Fantastic. There we go. Talk and code at the same time. Great idea, Ben. Gonna go ahead and I might have done a bit of prep work to just have a whole bunch of Markdown already ready. Um, but yeah, so I've got now a Markdown file that's inside the source directory. I'm even going to go one level deeper. I'm going to create a stream. Maybe I'll call this schedule. I'm not sure. What do y'all think? How would you, if you were going to a hub, like if you're going to SomeAntics.dev and you wanted to look for an individual stream, would you want it to be slash streams slash whatever the slug is, or would you want it to be slash schedule slash whatever the uh, slug is? Love to know y'all's opinions here. But okay, so I've got source streams. I'll pluralize that. There we go, and then I'll have this markdown file. And now when I run the dev server, we build an underscore site, and we get our accessible SVGs with Fantastic. We get that. That's working just fine. But Eleventy is no longer looking for markdown files at the root of our repository, so it completely ignores our stream schedule with Eleventy. So that's pretty cool. We get to configure this as much as we want. We get to have totally safe, unbuilt markdown files at the root of our repo in case we want readmes and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. So, all right. When I think about it from the perspective of past events, I lean towards streams over schedule. I dig it. Let's do that. So we're going to keep it streams. I like that opinion. You can see it's immediately rebuilding everything. Eleventy is so snappy, y'all. But we still have a few problems that I want to address. For one thing, again, looking at this is not a full HTML page. It's just a fragment of an HTML page. It's missing the HTML tag. It's missing the doc type. It's missing the head. It's missing the body tag. It's missing a whole lot. So Eleventy is transforming our markdown into these fragments, but we can tell it like, hey, I want you to take this fragment that you're generating for this markdown file. I want you to stick it inside just a layout, right? Some HTML that I've defined. So we're going to create what Eleventy calls layouts, which to do this, we first go into source, because we've just told Eleventy that we're looking in source for all the things now, basically. We're going to go in source, and we're going to create a folder. And this folder has a bit of a magic name. That magic name is underscore includes. We can go back to the docs here. We can, Eleventy includes, I guess it's, yeah. So you can see that there are ways to override the name of the includes directory, but by default it's going to be underscore includes, and I tend to prefer to stick to with defaults. I think that's easier to Google after the fact, so it's easier to onboard more people if I'm looking to get more contributors to this. So this underscore includes directory, effectively Eleventy is going to use this as a way to establish globally accessible layouts. So layouts that any markdown file across my entire site can leverage. And we'll see what this means. I'm going to, inside my underscore includes, I'm going to create stream.html. And this right here is going to be my layout. So my layout is called stream.html. And I'm going to add in our, pretty standard HTML boilerplate here. I don't want to do a whole lot of fancy stuff here. So, I'll give this a title of SomeAntics. And inside here, I'm going to have, go all out, have a header. SomeAntics. I'm going to have a main. And back in Anthony's stream, we talked a bit about skip links, which are ways to just completely skip over the navigation. They're the first focusable element in a page. And yeah, they just let you skip over navs which is particularly helpful if you're navigating the page with a keyboard. So I'll go ahead and add in a skip link here. I'm going to say skip to content. This is going to go directly to main content. And I'm going to put some stuff in here. Look at that, stuff. All right, so we have built out, a basic HTML boilerplate. We could expect that, we might want to stick some content in here somewhere, but now that we've got our layout, I want to apply this layout to our streams. So we have our stream markdown file here, and this has the contents, but we can also specify some like metadata for this markdown file, some metadata that will get applied, that will be made available as effectively variables. And this metadata is called front matter. To specify some front matters, specify some front matter, we can create, we fence it off with these like triple hyphens. And then inside here, we can use YAML-like syntax. So this is just kind of one of the like magic keywords that you just have to know for Eleventy. If you want to say, hey, this markdown file, it's going to use this layout, then you have to use layout : and then the name of your layout. I'm going to say stream.html. And here we see the benefit of sticking our layout inside underscore includes. Because when Eleventy runs into a name like this, it's going to go, oh, stream.html, like that's the name of a layout. I'm going to go check inside the includes directory and see if a stream.html exists. So by sticking stream.html inside underscore includes, we have made our layout globally available. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And at this point, I want to return to our page. I'm specifically on accessible SVGs with Fantastic. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say, oh, maybe it would help if I added a slash. Accessible SVGs with Fantastic. Cannot get. Oh, it's because it's actually streams. There we go. That makes sense. So look at that. We've got, we have our H1 that says stuff. We've got our skip link. We've got our header. Absolutely ugly looking site, but it is technically a site. There's just one problem with it. You might have noticed that it doesn't have any of our content anymore. We're not actually showing our content to the user. And that's because, like, how would it know? Chan says, ship it. I agree. When we look at this layout that we're using, this page that Eleventy is supposed to slot our content into, there's no real way for Eleventy to know where our content should go. So we want to tell it, hey Ferdo, good to see you. We want to tell it where to put the content. And to do this, we're going to use Liquid's just interpolation, injection, templating syntax, which is going to be these double curly braces. Inside here, we can put a Liquid expression, or we could put a variable. Eleventy aggregates a whole bunch of variables for us that are made available when we need it inside of our markdown templates as well as inside of our layouts here. And one of those variables, and again, this is just a bit of a like Eleventy magic that you just kind of have to know, is that we can say content. And Eleventy is going to look at this and it's going to go, okay, do we have a variable anywhere for content? Yeah, we totally do. It's going to be the contents of our markdown file. Allegedly. Allegedly. Huh. Content. Is it content? I would think it would be content. My mind's blown. What about contents? Maybe that's it. Maybe that... RIP. Web development was a mistake and must be burned down. Alright. Eleventy. Content. Layouts. Let's look at the docs here. Content. What if, you know what? I bet you I need to kill the dev server. I bet you that's it. Let's kill the dev server. Restart it. Does Eleventy assume liquid templates for the HTML extension? It should. It might not. We will see. Oh, you know what? Oh, that Yeah, no, wait. Ah, okay. This is embarrassing. This is very embarrassing. I was modifying the underscore site directory. I want to be modifying my layout. Look at that. Easy thing to trip you up. So I'm going to stick content here inside the layout, not inside your underscore site, because you shouldn't be modifying the site after it's been built. You should rebuild. That makes sense. Yeah, here we go. So everything's working now. We happen to have we now have all of our contents just kind of injected here into our page. So it took our markdown, it converted it into an HTML fragment, and then it slotted that fragment into our layout because we told it to with the content liquid expression. So yeah, we also have this for our other. Well, actually, no, we don't. We don't have this for stream schedule. There's nothing inside stream schedule with Eleventy. There's nothing in here to tell it that, hey, this should be using the same layout. So if I were to go to the stream schedule with Eleventy, can I copy relative path? If I were to go here, kill all the duplicate stuff. And, you know, it would also help if I didn't have the MD extension. You can see that it is not in any way using our layout. So I could go into the front matter and I could say, hey, for every stream markdown file, I need to add in the layout into the front matter. But that's going to lead to a lot of code duplication, and that's no fun. It means it's incredibly easy to forget, it's incredibly easy to miss, and really and truly, I think all of my streams should by default use the same layout. So I have this problem of I want to apply the same front matter property to all of the markdown files inside streams here, no matter how many there are. I want to apply it all. And to do this, I can use an Eleventy feature called directory data files. So I'll go back to the docs, and I'm looking for, yeah, here we go. Directory data files. I'll put this link in the chat as well for y'all to follow along. Directory data files are a way for you to specify the values of the front matter or of the various data that Eleventy aggregates for an entire folder at once. So here's how we do this. I can create a new file inside streams, my streams directory here. I'm going to call it streams.json. I could also, if I wanted, call this streams.eleventydata.json. Notice the 11ty, but I'm going to keep it short. Streams.json. And notice that the name streams directly correlates with the name of the directory that we're in. That is a requirement for directory data files, is Eleventy knows that a JSON file is a directory data file if it shares the same name as its directory. And inside here, I'm going to have an object. It's going to have a layout property. That layout property is going to be stream.html. Eleventy is rebuilding. And now if I go back to the stream schedule with Eleventy, we now have our lovely layout. So we're able to do lots of powerful stuff. At some point, you know, you can imagine I would style this, I would add more content, but yeah, we do have a site up and running now. I would be curious to know kind of what y'all are thinking at this point, what questions you have, and yeah, just kind of letting me know what you're thinking. In the meantime, the next problem I want to solve is I don't currently have a homepage. I would like for the homepage to serve really as a very traditional index.html of just like, because back in the days of yore with web development, index.html was really a link to all of the other more interesting pages in the directory. So I'm going to do that. I want a page that can serve as a list of links to all the different streams that we've got. So to do that, I am going to create, let's see, let's create, I'm going to put this inside source. I'm going to create index.md. And this name matters because Eleventy is going to take index.md at the root level of what it cares about, which is source. It's going to take the index.md and it's going to turn it into index.html And that makes it basically like that is the root route for, hey, Alan, good to see you. I really enjoyed watching you learn Gatsby last night. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me hang out. Um, yeah, so because index.md is going to get turned into index.html, and browsers recognize index.html as like saying this is like the root. Whatever we put inside index.md is going to be this is going to be what you would get if you were to go directly to SomeAntics.dev whenever I set up that domain. So I'm going to go ahead and create this, and I'm going to say, SomeAntics. Really, what I'm thinking about is I probably don't want to do this a whole lot during Markdown, right? I typically think of Markdown as very static content, but the idea is this is actually going to be fairly dynamic when we build. I want it to generate a list of all the links to all the different streams, and you could do that in Markdown. That would be totally fine. It's totally doable. But I don't know. For me personally, I just feel like that's more of a layout thing. So I'm going to create a home layout. I'll call this home.html. I'm going to give it, let's see, there we go, some antics. All right. I'm going to now say that this is, welcome to some antics. Anything is possible at SomeAntics.com. Absolutely dated web development references. Please let me know. Just put something in the chat. Put a tomato in the chat if this is something that's familiar to you, what I'm referencing here. Yeah. Cool. So now I kind of have this problem of I want to get a different link for every Markdown file. And I'd rather not hard code that. That seems really, really annoying. So I need some way to get... I'm sorry, Alan. I'm sorry. Berto, are you peacing? Good to have you here. Trying to go for like a Zombocom thing. Zombocom, how's that for like internet lore? Yeah, so I don't want to like hard code, because I could hard code a bunch of links, but that would not be fun. So instead, what I want to do is I want to have Eleventy provide all this information for me. And the way we can do this is is through what Eleventy calls collections. So Eleventy, you can think about it's processing all of our Markdown files, right? And it's processing them in some ways. And so it has to do a whole lot of organizing and a whole lot of data structures around the concept of processing Markdown files. And the way it does this internally is through collections. Collections are arrays of objects that represent all of our Markdown templates. So to see this in action, I'm going to give y'all the link to the docs here, just so that you can learn more about collections. To see this in action, I want to first create a collection. I'm going to go into my .eleventy, and I'm going to accept an argument here, Eleventy config. You can call this whatever you want. The docs call it Eleventy config. I'm going to call it Eleventy config. I'm going to say Eleventy config dot, I think it's add collection. I always have to go back and check on this. Add, yeah. So I've got this Eleventy config argument. I'm going to call the add collection method. I give the collection a name, and then I tell it, hey, here's how, of all the Markdown files that you know about Eleventy, here's how you pare this down to specifically the Markdown files that I want to describe in this collection. So here's that in practice. I'm going to create a collection called streams. And streams is going to take, I'm going to create a function here. And for me, I know that, I'm going to try not to go back and forth so often, but I know that all the streams I care about exist in the streams directory. So Eleventy exposes a way for me to get access to specifically the Markdown templates that are available given a file path, given a glob. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to give it a glob that says, hey, I want you to look specifically in the streams directory. And I want you to see if you can find any markdown files in there. Take those markdown files and create a collection from that. That collection is then going to be globally available. It's a little, there's a lot of steps here. It's a bit of a chain. So let's, I guess, just work through this. Once again, I always have to check on the docs, but I know that this is called get filtered by glob. And that's just a thing I've picked up from Andy Bell's Eleventy course, as well as from the docs here. So Eleventy add collection, return collection API dot get filtered by glob, and then you can pass it the glob. So let's do that. Return collection API dot get filtered by glob. I'm gonna say just do, well, it's already in source. We told it to look in source because down here. So I'm gonna say streams star.md. This should work. Fingers crossed. Every developer's mood, right? This should work. Let's see if this works. If I'm ever curious if something's working or what information I have available at a given moment, the thing that I will typically end up doing is I will go to my layouts and I will, first of all, I'll put collections. Sorry. Yeah, actually it is collections, isn't it? Do I have to do collections dot? Yeah. Okay. So my collection, this streams collection, is made available for me globally inside the collections.streams variable. So we can access that if we want to get all of our information about the streams collection. I'm going to just see what happens if I do this. If this doesn't work, we got something else I want to try. Gonna refresh this. Yeah, it's not liking that. So another thing I can do is I can take whatever is available here, this collections.streams. Hi, Tuna. Sorry, y'all, my cat is intensely traipsing through some bags. There's gonna be a bit of... Hey, Tuna, buddy. Now's not the time. Thank you, friend. Alright, I can take whatever's inside collections.streams and I can stick it inside, or I can pass it to a built-in log function. And the fact that nothing's logged is telling me that I probably need to restart the dev server. When in doubt, just restart the dev server. Doesn't seem to be logging anything. What if I refresh? Yeah, so probably something wrong with my glob then. What if I do source streams.md and then we'll see if this works. Yeah, gotta love some pipes. What if... See if this works, maybe. Who knows? Always an adventure doing live coding, right? Oh boy. I bet you this'll do it. This is the magic. This'll make it happen. Well, perhaps not. What if I bet you it's a plural problem. I bet you I'm doing collection instead of collections. See if that's it. No, it's okay. That's interesting. I swear I've done this many times before. And I am going to cheat by pulling up my own code for my own site. Let's see how it's done over there. When in doubt, right? Collections, add collection. Give it a name. Do this. Oh, I'm doing some weird sorting stuff. Don't worry about that. I'm just gonna steal this. I think, it's the // that's the problem. That is the problem. So we're going to do that. Steal this. This will do it. I'm confident. Perhaps. Man. Well, we might just have to leave this as like a teaser for part 2, which I'll be doing in 2 weeks. Look at that. The suspense is building. Man, I'm so curious. Like, source streams, 11EJ, like source streams, and then all markdown files inside there. What if I go back to home, instead of logging it? Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I don't have a log. Restart. Refresh. Web development was a mistake. It must be stopped. Fascinating. Do y'all have any other questions about Eleventy? While I think about what this could possibly be. Oh, you know what? Pet you. What if I try? If you've got any questions, definitely put it in the chat, and I will go ahead and try to answer them. Collections.streams. For does Eleventy do MDX? Not out of the box. That's not one of the templating languages that's supported out of the box. However, Mike Riethmuller, I believe, has been doing some great work with, at very least, a proof of concept for MDX. Eleventy's goal is building very lightweight websites. And that means that you can serve JavaScript over the wire, but that's not really what Eleventy's like for. So it doesn't exactly make it easy. Eleventy does support what are called partials. I sometimes call them fragments. But basically, we could stick more stuff in our underscore includes. Like if I decided that I wanted a reusable header, I could go in and I could say header.html. And inside here, this is going to be a pretty rudimentary header, but I'm going to do it anyways. So I can have a header, just says SomeAntics, exclamation point. I can go back into my home layout, and I can do %include header.html. This should maybe work. It would help if I maybe didn't do this part quite yet. Let's do string.log, and hopefully if it fails, it'll fail silently. It's just not building anything at all anymore, y'all. Alan says, I don't really understand MDX yet, so it's all good. You know, that's fair. MDX definitely has some magic. Something probably seems to be failing, though. That's... Maybe change the text of the homepage directly. That's a good... Oh! Yo, I figured it out! I figured it out. We weren't consuming our layout. That'll do it. That's like, asking why this, the function that you wrote, isn't doing anything when you didn't even import it. Look at that. I'm sure everything magically works now. Let me refresh. Look at that. Things are happening. We've got our partial. We probably have... Look at that. We have logs. That's it. I did not lead you astray. We do have logs. Alan's done that a million times. Yeah, I feel that. That is a real mood, friend. Yeah, so we have tons of information here. And I want to stress, like, here's what we're doing. We have this, like, globally available collections.streams array. And we're iterating over it, and we're sticking everything... we're doing just basically just iterating over it, saying each element is called stream. And then here, we're just going to pass stream to the log function. However, I want to do more, right? I actually, instead of just doing like instead of logging, I want to actually show some information. So let's do that real quick. We're running up on time, and I do have, as ever, a 1 o'clock meeting, so I don't want to take too long on this, but I want to demonstrate some cool things you can do with this. So I'm going to, for each stream in our streams directory here, I want to take the stream's name and link. I want to use those. So for a given stream, we have a lot of information, and I want to call your attention to, there's a lot. I'm just gonna do some magic, but you can look and see everything that's in here. Let's first put just put an anchor tag, and in here I'm gonna say href equals stream dot URL. We're just gonna let that be a bit of magic, and for now I'm gonna put stream in here because we don't have any more information than that really that we can use. So I'm gonna put stream dot URL in here. I'm gonna refresh, and you can see that because we have 2 streams in our stream directory, we now have 2 stream bullet points here. I'd like to get more information about this, and we can use front matter to supply more information about our streams. So this is really helpful if you just need some reusable information in general. So every stream is going to have a name, right? It's going to have a title. And so I'd like to be able to kind of abstract that out into my data layer. So I'm going to go into my front matter here. I'm going to create a title. You could call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it title. That seems familiar to me. I'm going to nuke this from here, and we'll see why in a moment. Building accessible SVG icons in React with Chantastic. Similarly, I'm going to come down here. This one doesn't have any front matter yet, but I'm going to do this. I have to wrap this in quotes because it's got an apostrophe. So we've got this. We now have title inside of our front matter. And what that means is when I come back to home, when I'm iterating and getting each stream, I can now inject here stream.title. We just created that title property and now exists on this stream object. And lies. All lies. Oh, nope. It's not stream.title. It's stream.data.title. We would know this if I had spent more time investigating the logs. There we go. Look at that. So we now have links. These will take us directly to our stream, right? And now that we've abstracted away our title, we can actually reuse this for different things. So I could go back into my stream layout, and I could say, I know that every stream will have a title, and I know that that semantically needs to be an H1, so I could come in here, I could create an H1 tag, and inside here, we're not iterating over any collections. We just simply have our title front matter made available to us as a global object. Eleventy combines a whole bunch of data for us at any given moment using a process called the data cascade. It's really cool if you want to take a look at the docs, or maybe we'll explore that in 2 weeks' time. But for now, I can just use this title variable. I can also reuse it up here too. So I can say title pipe SomeAntics, and now we have an H1 up here. And if I were to go back to our homepage, go back to the other stream, we would see that here too. We would see our H1. Super useful, for instance, if you wanted to add classes to your, like Tailwind classes maybe, to your H1, or if you wanted to put some stuff in between your H1 and your content. Super cool abstraction that you can do here. And also lets us have title, like the document title, which is incredibly cool. Yeah, I need to sign off, but join us next week. Next week, we're going to have Chantastic on. He's going to walk us through his journey of discovering how to make accessible SVG icons in React. Really excited for that. The following week, we're going to be picking this back up. I'm going to be using this site as just kind of like a recurring thing to build. So if you're curious about Eleventy and want to learn more, feel free to join us in 2 weeks' time. The week after that, we have Stephanie Eccles on, and we are going to be designing a layout, a design, a theme for Style Sage. So it's going to be an exciting few weeks. I'm looking forward to it. I will catch y'all next week, and thank you all for joining. Have a good one, y'all.